Norwich City Council's Licensing Subcommittee, Thursday, 16th of September 2021. We have one major item today, which is a temporary event notice for the car park in Lower Clarence Road, Norwich. In fact, there are two separate temporary event notices. And we'll start with apologies, and there were none, and declarations of interest. Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name's Ian Stutely. We've got Councillor Martin Schmierer, Councillor Caroline Ackroyd on the committee today, and David Lowens from MP Law, who's representing us. And I'll ask David to start with some information and just check that we've got all the papers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, everybody should have a copy of the agenda. In addition to the agenda, there is a photograph, black and white, of the site with writing on it, which I believe is originally from the applicant but received via the police this morning. There is a document, Event Safety Management Plan, and hopefully everybody has a copy of that. The version I have on Event Overview says updated 10 September 2021. And is that the most recent edition so far as everybody knows?
Yes, it is.
There are some additional black and white photographs. One being a metal object on a field of rocks, I think received from the applicant.
Okay.
And there are also a number of photographs, black and white again, showing the surface of a car park, and an overhead showing cars and buses present. It's quite poor definition, that one, but those have been received and have been seen by the councillors. Does everybody have all the documents that the council is going to be considering this morning? Lovely, thank you. The test is that the council, having regard to the objective notice, will consider whether or not it's appropriate to serve a counter notice, and the legal test is to serve a counter notice should the council consider it appropriate for the promotion of a licensing objective to do so. Obviously, if it decides not to give a counter notice, it shall make that decision and also give its reasons. Chair, with your permission, I don't think you want the entire report read out. Everybody's had a chance to read it, so perhaps just to summarise.
Thank you, Rachel. Just to be sure, are there any additional items that you wish to let us know about, or any amendments to the original report?
No, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on, I think, straight away to presentation from Mr. Tempest, I believe. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your role, and then briefly introduce us to the scheme that's being proposed here, and makes, if you would, some references, especially to the objections that we've received, as well as the differences between this particular item and the previous one that we had a few weeks ago. But the public can make reference to that if they wish to.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yes, my name is Gavin Tempest, and I'm representing the person giving notice, I should say, rather than the applicant today. If you don't mind, there's two people who may need to answer questions or might have a little bit of a speaking part. So if I just introduced Dean first, please. You just quick background.
Yeah, I'm Dean Bath. I've been in the licence industry over 10 years now. Last 6 years, been outside events from festivals and Euro fan parks for all the football fans, etc.
Thank you. Welcome back.
So I'm Ian Tilley, Security Manager for the event. I've got 20 years experience in the industry, including Norwich City Football Club and multiple major sporting events, including the Olympics and public events too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to you.
Thank you. So firstly, just before I go to a bit of a script. I should sort of say there is a good reason why we're back here again. It's not intended to waste members' time. There's a legitimate reason which I'll cover in the explanation, and neither are we in any way in conflict with any of the responsible authorities. In fact, as I will explain, there's been attempts at dialogue and consultation throughout this. And if I might start by just covering some of the things that were heard as questions in the first hearing. So I'll just read this because it's quite important that I just sort of get through it, if that's all right. So by way of background, until 2014, I was a senior police officer, and I was accredited policing major sporting events commander. So it's a long time ago. Spring 2014 was the last time I did this, but I spent 3 seasons as ground commander at Norwich City Football Club home games, and the last one, which as I say was in spring 2014, that included at the time public order outside of the ground before the match. So a bit of context. What happens to away team supporters on daytime Norwich City football games? I'll start by the location that we're talking about, Lower Clarence Road car park. It's a coach park and car park that services coaches that begin arriving up to 3 hours before kickoff. It'd be regular if one of the coaches for away fans came before that. Arrivals come in periodically, so they don't arrive at the same time. And the latest coach comes in sometimes with just 30 minutes to go. So there's no time for them to do anything. They just have to go straight to the ground. There are some family groups on board with under 18s in the party, so they're on coaches, but there aren't many. So they average probably about 4 young people, by which I mean 4 under 18s, or so on a full coach. That's on average. And early arrivals at this coach park tend to want to stop off somewhere before making their way to Carrow Road. A high proportion of those people look for somewhere to get an alcoholic drink. It's the thing that happens before they get to the ground. So back in 2014, there were some city centre operators who catered for away fans. So at one time there was the Griffin on Yarmouth Road, which took 3 coaches, the Complete Angler and the Prince of Wales Road pub across Foundry Bridge, as well as a selection of bars on Riverside Entertainment Centre. Currently, there is the outdoor area of the Queen of Iceni, which is Wetherspoon's outlet on Riverside, and the waterfront. So that is the availability for away fans. Now the former, so this is the Queen of Iceni, they won't take away fan customers inside. So away supporters who find themselves in Norwich looking for a drink cannot go inside, and they can only be served alcohol if they buy a meal. The waterfront, which is the only other major outlet, which is a standalone place, but they only take, there is no seating inside the waterfront. So outdoors and indoors, away fans go there, make their way from Lower Clarence Road on the coach, and they do not sit down. There is no control or regulation of groups from coaches as to where they go. There's no control as how they might interact with troublesome groups of Norwich City fans, or when they choose to make the last bit of the walk to the football ground. There is monitoring of it. There are spotters from the police contingent who watch what goes on and can take action, but largely those away supporters in the hundreds are largely free to walk in and around Norwich City Centre before the games. That's what they do. This event, for which 2 notices have been given, is an outlet for away team supporters, and the customer base is exclusively patrons arriving at this destination by coach. I should say that congregation of away fans in itself is not in itself a negative. If that congregation, as back in 2014, is contained in a well-regulated area with surveillance and security, this becomes a known. It's a known, as opposed to these coach occupants drifting around the city, many looking for places to drink, and then there may be conflicts with Norwich City Football Club home supporters. It's not regulated. Police officers will spot, they will find out, but they do not regulate that. So coach customers are currently walking around having drinks in a limited number of places in Norwich. Since the previous hearing, a lot of effort has gone into addressing the concerns which I heard raised at the subcommittee. Unfortunately, on this occasion, the police haven't taken part in this process for reasons which we might understand because they're busy doing other things. But my experience, and I suggest good practice, is that responsible authorities should start at least to try to work with operators to make sure that the licensing objectives are met. So the most recent event management plan, and apologies that this hasn't come through, it was emailed through to admin. So these additions that have been made to the event management plan have been made in good faith by the operator, trying to get this to be as safe as possible, having heard what's happened at the hearing, but without consultation with the responsible authorities, with the exception of the discussion about toilets. I should caveat that. So the police know about this, but they haven't entered into a dialogue. That's just what's happened. Inevitably, because this was taking time to go through what responses about what happened last time, there's going to be a bit more detail, and we accept that and ask please that members will bear with us. Since getting involved with the team behind me, I've seen various email exchanges which document periods of suggested agreement between the police as responsible authority and the persons giving notice, and then that somebody's changed their mind on that and it's been withdrawn. But just currently, we're not really having a dialogue about it. So we're rehearsing the detail of it here today, and that's why there's a new event management plan. So again, please bear with us. We're conscious that this is the second hearing for our events within 3 weeks. There is good and legitimate reason for issuing new notices so soon after the last decision of the subcommittee, and I ask for your patience and understanding for today's hearing. So the intention, as Dean said 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, has always been to trial these events, working with the authorities, and please accept that it's not in this team's interest to have trials where anything but the most effective management is in place. Nobody wants this to result in any incidents, least of all, actually, the applicant. Saturday's fixture, which is the first of the notices against Watford, is actually the optimal event for a trial, because the vast majority of away supporters are known to be travelling by rail, by train, and they won't come near Lower Clarence Road area after arriving at Norwich railway station. We're anticipating that the potential customer base will be the equivalent of 2 coachloads of customers at most, and that's from all of the coaches that will arrive prior to the match. The bar and drinking area will be seen by coach occupants because it's now at the top end of an enclosed area, but it's furthest away from any moving traffic. There won't be any signage advertising this apart from the display on the bar itself, and apart from the signage that says away fans only, which every football supporter who travels will have experienced seeing those licensed venues. If I can look at the photo, it's a shame it hasn't come out in colour. So this is the one which you saw last time, but there's several annotated. Members could look at that photograph now. I can't describe it. It's the one that was used that last time, but it's got annotations on it. So it's a good photograph, but there are some things that I need to explain that are no longer part of the operating schedule, and in the most recent event management plan, this is covered. So where the coaches are currently, there you will see virtually at the top of that car parking area, there's an extended area where I think there's a van in it and 2 coaches, which is a tarmacked area, and that does feature on one of the police photographs. So that is in colour. You can see that marked out as the area where the bar and drinking area will be. And then we refer to the event management plan, which shows the location where the toilets, everything's inside a contained area. The coaches will not be as close to that area, but there will be a traffic management officer who will be SAA accredited, who will be on duty 3 hours before the match, and the first coach to arrive will be parked in, reversed in, before the bar opens, nearest to where the bar and drinking area. So it's effectively, that creates a physical barrier for any of the other coaches that arrive. And then from then on, the next coaches that arrive will be stacked up towards the entrance, but further away from the bar. And we now have the resource to be able to do that. Where you see cars parked around the perimeter near to those coaches, the nearest car will be on the side of the car park that you can just about see an ambulance vehicle above where it says coaches annotated on a plan. So that there will only be cars of from any supporter parked below that, so towards the bottom of the photograph. And if you look, there's some, you can just about see, so they're actually red and white, but grey and white plastic bollards which separate a road which goes down to the bottom of this plan into an area which is called car parking area, and that's where the majority of car arrivals will be parked. So the whole layout has been changed so that there's segregation and there's protection there. So whether people are home supporters or away supporters using the car park, they're not going to be near the bar, they're not going to be near the coaches that arrive, apart from the latest one that comes in, which won't be going, they won't be directly involved in the bar area anyway. That area at the top, there is a photograph that the police provide, but you'll see it's actually screened by fencing and hedgerow, and this is interspersed by brick walls actually, but it's actually enclosed on 3 sides, and it's screened for passers-by who might be walking on Lower Clarence Road, so that the operation is actually contained and it's screened as well. The intention is to also create, if you like, a safe corridor using barriers. Just if you wouldn't mind, I'd just ask Dean to just describe how that would work, please.
Yeah, I can't see the photo. From the bar area along the wall where the road is, Lower Clarence Road. Thank you. Yeah, where the coaches are parked now, down the left-hand side, there'll be a pedestrian fencing from the bar all the way down to the entrance at the beginning, at the front. So even if the coaches reverse back, they'll only come back to the fencing. So that'll give a good safe corridor for anyone either coming off the coach or coming out of the bar to walk down and out of the car park.
If I can just refer to this term vertical drinking, because there's a lot of discussion or mention of vertical drinking. So what is vertical drinking? If Michelle and I were to ask to define it, I think we'd agree that it is generally used to mean dense crowds jostling each other, all with alcohol, large rounds of drinks being passed to patrons. So the problem with it is it's basically harder to monitor and regulate. So I think we can agree that's what we mean by vertical drinking. That was discussed at the hearing. So for our event, if you refer to the event management plan, the drinking area is at least 25 metres square. That's big space, and customer entry will be self-regulated by the fact that coaches are arriving at different times. And this, for the Watford game, there probably are only going to be a maximum of 3 coaches anyway, but they'll be regulated so there's not, the arrivals are going to be the maximum of 1 coach at a time, assuming that everybody from those coaches choose to enter this bar. It's going to be controlled at the entry by door supervision. And as regards this congestion, this inability to monitor, the door supervision will monitor that area where people are standing after having purchased their drinks, they're standing enjoying a drink, to make sure that they keep that area below the capacity where individuals can't be monitored for either their drinking or how much they drink or their demeanour. And that's backed up by a fixed CCTV presence and a body-worn video which has personal CCTV by a door supervisor. So there's going to be plenty of space. Initially, this is still referring to vertical drinking. Dean was brokering with the football liaison officer, she's not here, but to include some seating within that drinking area. What didn't come out at last hearing is it was that officer's direction that seating shouldn't be allowed. Now, while there's an opportunity in future events to include seating in operating schedules, we could discuss that with the police. We would have to run the first event on Saturday without it. We just logistically cannot get seats to put in. But we think all of that issue around vertical drinking has been mitigated against with these measures. Second, another thing that was mentioned last time is crowd behaviour. Well, I'm out of date with it, but I can remember what it's like to be the public order commander in charge of that. And Michelle was asked about the propensity for disorder among football supporters at last hearing, gave a sort of testimony about what that's like. So it is a fact that the number of supporters travelling to away matches contains only a small minority of troublemakers or problem drinkers. That's fact, and the statistics of arrests and ejections of the ground would bear that out. And by and large, supporters want to be able to enjoy seeing the match. They haven't come here to drink, they've come here to see the match, and travelling home without incident. And that applies more to people that come in groups on a coach than people who are individuals who made their own way on foot, for example. And in a grouping such as that in our drinking area, where there will be natural surveillance, so there's space now, so it's not all people bunched up. And what natural surveillance means is that the majority of people that are there that are actually just there to watch the match and they're having a beer, yes, they can exert influence over the behaviour and sobriety of other people. That's in addition to what goes on with interventions with door supervision and with the monitoring that will happen anyway. So there's a bit of self-regulation that comes with the setup. And so we will make sure that the drinking customers, those people that are in this space, which is quite a big space now, will be limited to the level at which this natural surveillance can occur. So people don't have to be allowed in, and in fact on Saturday it's not going to be an issue because of volume. But as a model in the operating schedule, they're going to be regulated as they go in, so that this space is just a pleasant atmosphere. Another thing that was raised was that the bar might be a pit stop. I think the term was used for away supporters who would then wander into the city centre rather than take the direct route to Carrow Road round by Clarence Road, which is just a few minutes walk. So first of all, that behaviour is time limited because away supporters need to get into the ground ahead of the kickoff. That's what they're there for. And in any event, away supporters, however they arrive, if they haven't got much time to go and the kickoff is about to start, they're going to go to Carrow Road via Clarence Road over that bridge anyway. That route, incidentally, is the one, it's not only the most direct route, 5 minutes slow walk, 10 minutes, including turnstiles, but it is actually the one that visiting supporters who arrive by coach, Norwich City Football Club announced that's the accepted route. They're saying if you arrive by coach, follow that route, just round the corner and then across into Carrow Road. They actually, these people that choose to go, that arrive in time to enjoy a drink, have no real reason to head off elsewhere towards the city centre. So it might be a pit stop. It's not a real reason, because while there are customers at the bar in the car park, they're in a regulated, secure environment where early signs of any problem will be monitored on CCTV, which is actually an opportunity for the police rather than a threat. It's simply an outlet for customers who find themselves parking up in the coach nearby. They see the bar, they've got time to fill before entering the ground, and otherwise they'd use that time to walk off who knows where to a limited place where they could get a drink in Norwich City Centre, and that's what people are doing. But here they've got 90 minutes where they can enjoy the offer, and the event management plan has been amended. The last one, one of the main differences is that the service of alcohol will be from 1 until 2:30 only. So even with that limited number of customers, it's fixed for that 90-minute period. That's in the new EMP. So really, there's no reason that any Norwich City football supporters would walk to this site. I mean, if they wanted to drink themselves, they've got a plethora of places that accept football supporters wearing Norwich regalia. And why would they walk it? It's not advertised, etc. And if they walk past because that's their customary route to the ground, they're not really going to be able to see what's going on. That's not an issue. The next thing is the photographs. I'm nearly finished. So
Chair, sorry to disturb, but we've just been hearing it's 1300 to 1430 only. So before moving on,
yes.
Are you applying to amend the temporary event?
Yes.
Looking at para 5.
Yes,
that
we are.
mentions wider.
Okay.
So at the moment, para 5 says 12:30 to 1500 on 18 September. So is that changing to 1300 to 14:30?
Exactly.
And is there a change to the 21st September?
To be honest, I try to answer your question directly, but it's difficult because we don't know whether the limited trial on the 18th is going to go ahead. And then
it's fine, sorry, we don't need reasons. I'm just at this point making sure committee knows what it's dealing with. So the first date is being reduced.
Yes.
You don't have to change the second date.
But we won't change it at the moment because clearly there's a discussion to be had and we want to make sure people are happy with what the offer is. But the trial, the issue of having a trial is so we can test these things and make sure it's secure. So,
thank you. I think because we're considering two 10s at the same time today, I think we should have clarity on both of them before we discuss, because we won't be able to determine. Well, we could determine them separately. But our discussions on the determination will be at the same time. So we really ought to have the facts in advance.
yeah. So that would mean so it would be 7:50. So that would be. So yes, David, that would be 5:45 to 7:15 to allow that 90 minutes. So we've got the same principle applies. I'm sorry that was a bit vague, but it's just the undertaking is they're going to make this safe, and they might have to do more things on Tuesday. But you have to know what we intend to do now. Right? So that's why there's some confusion. Apologies for that. So according to the EDP on Monday, the headline objection from Norfolk Constabulary is concerned about rock attacks. And I'll quote, "The car park is full of loose materials such as rocks, which can be used as potential weapons against fans or the police." So that's been in the media. And I know
I think actually the committee will consider the evidence that we've got rather than articles in the local media.
Accepted, sorry. But Michelle has supplied several photographs for the attention of today's subcommittee hearing showing the surface of the car park. So this surface in the area that the bar and drinking area will operate in is largely tarmacked now. There is the edge of the surface round about where the barriers will have some loose material, but it's mainly even, and it can and will be swept prior to the bar opening. So that's not the whole car park, that's just the main part of the area which is set up for a bar and drinking area. In risk assessing the use of loose material, we know that the likelihood of rocks and stones, in fact any hard material being thrown, is low. It doesn't actually happen. It's very low in the bar and drinking area here because there's constant surveillance. Any customer seen picking up debris will be seen and challenged. It's very low for the prospect of missiles being thrown from the bar outside for the same reason, but also there's actually no target. There's not, we're not expecting any crowds of Norwich City aggressive supporters to be challenging. It's a small, very small limited outlet, which is very well regulated. So, and that's going to have surveillance from security staff. So you've got CCTV, fixed CCTV and some physical surveillance by people. So we're watching what's going on. So the too low risk, it's low for customers having left the bar and drinking area, because in essence, they would be like any other person using the car park, wouldn't they? Arriving by coach or otherwise, and it's never been an issue. It's low for customers having left because they would have to consciously pocket rocks or stones and carry them for later use. And that does not happen. We can see what Michelle's got to say, but it's not a feature. And particularly when you've got the audience, the customer group that we're talking about here. As mentioned, this operator has successfully run other events which are football related. So one in particular we'd like to refer to, and that was the Eurozone Fan Park. Now that catered for 480 customers They were allowed in as customers to start drinking 2 hours before the European Championship football screenings. They stayed in for the entire screening, and then they were allowed in for 30 minutes afterwards. So the single photograph that I produced, which is the one with the rather larger rocks, and it does have a sort of like a metal staple in the middle of it. So that is a photograph of the surface of the Eurofan car park zone, with all these people drinking, far more many people drinking for far longer, with the screening of Euro football matches with its potential, you know, loss of temper and all the other things and emotions that goes with it. And not one person picked up or used a rock at that event. So this is not a real threat. The allegation that there's, because of the car park, people are going to start throwing missiles.
Okay, thank you. Just chip in at that point. The photograph that we see here appears to be largely gravel, and that it may be a staple or a tent peg or something like that that is there. So I'm just describing that for those that don't have sight of the photograph. Whereas the photographs we've seen from the police are of larger material or mix of material, some of which includes larger material. That's just for clarity. However, in the last hearing that we had, we did reference the potential for missiles to be thrown, but it wasn't the primary reason why we turned down the decision at the time. So for the benefit of those in the room and the committee, we should note that it wasn't a primary reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Fully accept that. The reasoning for the police as a responsible authority to object seems to contain a lot of reference to loose material, and so but as you say, I fully accept that. There
is still an objection from the police on the basis of potential for missiles to be thrown, and I think that objection came in before the plan was submitted. Michelle, do you have a change of view on the potential for missiles to be thrown?
Chair, I would like to make reference to the actual ground at some point, but that isn't the main issue why the police are objecting to it. So I'm happy to sort of discuss it more. But again, I don't want to focus too much on that because that was not the reason before and from the committee either as to why we had concerns. Thanks.
Thank you, that's noted. Would you like to continue, and then we'll bring Michelle in later?
Thank you. So in summary, I've finished, so thank you. On each match day, there are a significant number of groups of away supporters. They're walking through the streets of Norwich city centre, searching for a venue where they can get a drink. These groups are higher risk for conflict with Norwich City Football Club home supporters and for disorderly acts than any patronising that might patronise the bar in Lower Clarence Road car park. Saturday the 18th, 2 days away, is likely to be the best opportunity to trial this event. It's known that there'll be few coaches arriving with away support, and all the measures to regulate and ensure safety will be easier to put in place and test under these conditions. It's definitely a test for the operator. The bollards at the entrance to the car park, which led to congestion of coach and car traffic going in, have been removed. And there's ample room for 2 coaches side by side to have easy entrance and exit simultaneously, and the same for emergency vehicles. The bar and drinking area is now physically contained by boundary fencing and is far from the railway line and separated from any vehicular traffic. On each match day, there is a significant number of groups of away supporters walking through the streets of Norwich city centre. These, as I said, these groups are potentially higher risk of conflict, and in the event that there are any early signs of troublemakers or potential conflict, the CCTV monitoring facility has the option to hook up with the control room in Carrow Road ground. So there's an early warning system anyway. The events proposed have been welcomed by the club itself and have the backing of the car park operator. And just to reiterate, Dean and the team are under a duty to make sure that this trial supports the licensing objectives, but you can expect 100% they will manage it to do so effectively, because it's their business reputation and their investment that they need to be realised with future events, or even a full premises licence application. So responsible authorities, I argue, should be reassured that it'll be the operator and not them that need to police this event, and that's why the EMP has been amended so much. Yeah, they might quite rightly check on the day, but the team can provide this real-time CCTV as well as detailed recordings post events to make sure that it went okay, because it's a trial, and I suggest we can't expect better than that for a trial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll have some questions from members. I'll start and just ask about the objection from environmental protection, public protection, and that is regarding toilets, which I believe you haven't addressed. So could you do that, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Unfortunately, this was attempted to do it with Richard, but he's on leave, and we didn't know. But for the match on Saturday, there will be 2 portaloos and 5 separate urinals, which is over provision. I mean, we don't anticipate it to be a large female contingent, but it's over provision. And I spoke to Alec earlier, and I'm interested to know if that's acceptable.
Thank you. Alec, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Alec Miles. I'm one of the public protection officers here at Norwich City Council. From what Gavin Tempest just said, there will be sufficient capacity for the toilets now with the 2 portaloos and 5 urinals, so we don't have any further concerns on that matter now.
Okay, so just to confirm, you're withdrawing your objection to this 10?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll go with Councillor Schmierer first, please.
Yeah, thank you. There was also the mention about the accessibility issues with regards to those portaloos. Could you maybe clarify that, please?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get to the page in question. As I understand it, sorry, it is on page 40 of our agendas, and there was an issue about accessibility as well. But I know that's about sexual equality legislation, but also just making sure that there's accessibility issues surrounding that. I don't know if you've got any concerns about that, or if maybe Mr. Tempest can assuage any concerns that members may have on that regard.
Thank you. And also, there's a line there about hand wash facilities. Has that been covered as well, please?
In reverse order, yes, hand washing facilities and sanitisation is provided. That is in the event management plan, and there has been no objection to the provision at all, as I understand it. So it's been deemed. Let Alex say that that's what's been offered is suitable for the expected people using those facilities.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Ackroyd has a question about the open vessels.
Yes, thank you. Yes, one of the police concerns is that open vessels might be carried out, you know, from the area, and obviously you've said how you would address that. So people going out through the gate would be stopped if they were trying to leave with a drink. But how would you stop people passing drinks over the fence? You know, it's the sort of thing that we all do, we pass drinks back. You know, you've got an area, quite a long line, and I know that you've got people within, you've got a good ratio of staff inside, but I wondered how the ratio of people outside would stop that happening if people were so minded to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could you just introduce yourself again, please, and then just explain that answer.
Ian Tilley, I'm the security manager for the event. At the dispersal time, so once the bar closes at half hour before the event, as well as the staff on the gate, the staff that are operating within the arena area where the bar is open, would spread themselves along the fence line as well to try and prevent the drinks being passed over the fence.
Okay. While this event is open for an hour and a half in the first instance, there could be potential for vessels to be passed over right at the beginning of the event, where people wish to take their drinks onwards to the next bar, for example. So how are you going to prevent that from happening? If the bar is busy, it's going to be difficult to see.
Well, obviously, security will be at the entrance as well, so that will prevent drinks being brought out at the entrance. And again, the fence line would be monitored throughout, because that's an area of interest for anyone, really. So that would be a key area for us to monitor. It's a footpath in and out to the event, so there's going to be a lot of traffic down there. So it would be constantly monitored throughout the event.
So just, sorry, Councillor, in addition to that, there is surveillance monitoring of the event as well. So that I think Ian's deployment plan is described how that will be covered, which is a potential flashpoint for regulation anyway by that fence line. But there are people watching to see if this is happening, and so people can be redeployed if it becomes a problem. Is that fair to say?
Okay, so can you confirm that there'll be a live transmission from the cameras, and somebody will be watching those cameras?
Yes, Dean Bath, yes, I'll have access to that and I'll be there watching it.
Okay, so you'll have access. Will you be watching it constantly?
I'll be there watching that as well, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at the plan, because it's a new position for the bar and the licensable area since the last application, and it's a similar size. You've got 23 metres across the front, and then there's 3 other sides. Are those other sides entirely enclosed by fencing or walls?
Yes, they are. The railing fences, and along the road it has wooden fence and trees and bushes. You can't even see them from the actual roadside.
Okay. From the street view, it is going to be possible to see the front of the bar. So those that are walking past will know that there is a bar there.
Not very easily known. Once the first coach is in, it will be very hidden. The most they'll see is the fencing going down, so it's very well restricted.
Okay. There will be, of course, some noise. So there will be noise of people talking. So I think it's undoubted that people will know there's a bar there. I imagine it will go in the press today as well, should the committee be minded to grant the licence. How are you going to manage the potential there for a flashpoint either side of that barrier?
Well, the fence is so high and the bushes are so high. I wouldn't like to say how they could. They would have to come through to the front of the bar. You're talking 20-30 foot trees down along the side of it, all covered, and a 8-10 foot wooden fence going along the front as well, in between the bushes.
So the fence is 8 foot high all the way along that.
And then all the bushes all the way down from the side of that as well.
So the full 27 metres on the footpath side is a 2 metre high fence.
Yes, yeah, the ped fencing. What do you explain the question? All the way down. The 27 metres from the bar. Yes, that's all completely covered, completely with bushes, trees, and the big huge fence all the way down the side. Yes, and further down past that as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, and the fencing at the front. So you'll only have the ped fencing along the one stretch, and perhaps around the corner at the bottom end. That's correct. Yeah, just to guide them down away from the car park. Yes. Okay, thank you. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Ackroyd, please.
Yes, you said that for Saturday's match, the Watford match, you'd be expecting no more than 3 coaches. I wondered for the Liverpool match whether you got an estimate of how many there would be, and following on from that, if you'd got more people, how you will manage the queuing in the car park that might result from having more people. You're managing drinks not being handed over, you know, you've got to disperse your SIAs around the place. I wondered, so how many on the Tuesday match, and then how you manage queuing. Thank you.
Sorry, if you don't mind, I'll start and I'll just hand over. So yes, for the Liverpool game, it is a type of cup match which I don't understand, but it won't be so significant as a full Premiership match. But because we would expect the coach park to be more like the number of occupants that you see in our photograph, which I think the police. So there'll be multiple coaches. So yes, there will be a job to manage. And the first thing, before I hand over, is it will be done proportionately. So if it's possible to manage it and it's successfully having projected what happens from Saturday's game, then a proportionate decision could be made. But actually, if they think, well, we need more staff, I would expect that you'll make a risk assessment to do that, but I'll let you decide how you're going to do that, Dean.
Yep. Yes, we will. We'll always have at least one guard for every 100 people as we move forward. I think we've capped it at 300 on the event, so we'll at least have 3. We will be having a 4th guard anyway, and we have got one scheduled in for extra support for the Tuesday game as well. But that, again, from Saturday, we will determine how that goes and move forward. I mean, the queuing wise, once we're full, we'll full like any normal pub in the city. If you go to the door and the doorman says, sorry guys, we're full, we're not going to have them queuing outside waiting. It's just we're full. Please carry on into the city or carry on as you normally would.
Okay, thank you. Have you considered, because of the numbers that you're expecting for these 10s, have you considered capping the numbers for this particular application? And if not, why not?
Yeah, again, I'll start. I mean, for the Watford game, there is no reason to do that because it will be self-regulating. I mean, the number of people who are arriving with potential customers is actually so low that that's not an issue. But it clearly is an issue, as you say, for the higher population games. So I'll just see how you can handle that, please.
Yeah, I think we have originally put 300 as max on the temporary event notice, but that is a max. Everything will be judged on the day. So as the day progresses, if it's getting busier, or say the day, the hour, so that as it gets busier, that will be controlled by the security on the gate. If they feel at the time it comes that they're spread out enough and they can't actively patrol around and see if it makes sense, we will just stop then. So yeah, we won't go to 300 and stop. If they feel on the day on the time that 240, 250, 200 is adequate at the time, that is where they will stop. We won't continue onwards from that. It will be literally from the security point of view, them to manage.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll have some more questions later about the management plan. I think I'll bring in Michelle now to address the committee and also your opportunity to ask any questions and seek any clarification of what you heard so far.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I could start just going over my concerns initially. Firstly, I want to apologise for bringing us all back here again and for police objections. And I will be giving you a sense of deja vu with some of the points that I raise here again today. As you are aware, the previous 10 was submitted for the same concept for the Norwich game on the 28th of August. Police objected and this went to the licensing hearing. At that hearing, there were concerns raised by police that the 10 would undermine the crime and disorder licensing objective, and this was refused. Some of the reasons for that refusal, which you may be familiar with within the determination, were that because of a 10, you're unable to impose conditions on the temporary event notice. There was a recognition that there'd be an increased risk of disorder due to the groups of fans congregating in larger groups, primarily to consume alcohol, and due to no seating, rapid consumption of alcohol, and likely in a standing group. The council also accepted the police evidence of a flashpoint with opposing fans to be created. There have been conversations between myself and Mr. Tempest, and these took place after the hearing to come up with a resolution to accept future 10s. Unfortunately, this was successful. Despite efforts on both sides, we haven't been able to come up with a compromise. Despite this, 2 temporary event notices were then submitted by the applicant for the same car park to host the away fans for both the 18th and the 21st of September, which are the Liverpool and Watford game. Within the description of the 10, there's a paragraph which specifically states that following the hearing, there have been discussions to ameliorate the remaining concerns of police. Although I believe this was the intention of the applicant, this is not actually the case, and we still strongly oppose the idea, which is why I'm back here today. I appreciate that the applicant is frustrated with further police objections. However, these 10s were submitted prior to any agreements made and without any event management plan or map of the intended area provided. Police initially had less information provided to us than the original 10. And as you are aware, we only have a small time frame for police to make representations. As mentioned earlier, Mr. Tempest had tried to contact me sort of a number of times to discuss it further, and I had other commitments. I emailed Mr. Tempest on the morning of the 3rd of September to say that we hadn't seen the event management plan and it would be likely we would be objecting based on the information we knew. The event management plan was later received at 4 p.m. on that day, but the police representation had already been drafted following direction from senior management. So there are now two 10s to contend with, rather than a single one trial one, meaning that if there are issues with the first, we have no ability to stop the second event from taking place. As highlighted by the licensing committee before, the legislation gives no ability to legally add conditions on to control the activity. We have now evaluated the amended event management plan and are aware that the intention is to move the location of the bar to the top corner of the car park where the coaches usually park. On the actual plan, on the event management plan, where it shows where the new location will be, there's not actually any markings where the coaches will be located either. Although this location is within the same car park and it does seem a slight improvement on the previous suggestion, it is still felt that concerns relating to crime and disorder remain, and the issues raised by both police and the licensing committee relating to the vertical rapid drinking, the larger groups of fans congregating, and the potential flashpoint all remain unresolved. The intended area is described as tarmacked, but the car park generally is untreated with broken rubble and glass on the floor, which could easily be used if anyone wanted to be disorderly. I have provided photos of the site visit that I took last week. This does evidence the loose rubble, and which is immediately outside the intended bar area and is still a risk, albeit that is not the main reason why we are objecting. My understanding from the plan is to use the area that is framed on 3 sides with a boundary fencing and a wall. The intention is for crowd barriers to be placed on the open side, so these fans will in effect be penned in with only one way in and one way out and no emergency exit. This means that the front area will be congested with people queuing and congregating, as well as coaches trying to park immediately in the front of it and obstructing the entrance. If an incident occurs where someone is disorderly and violent, this could block the entrance during their ejection, or if they refuse to leave, this could push other patrons into the firing line of disorder. I know at the last hearing, members were concerned about there only being one entrance and one exit. This new idea restricts access less and creates a pinch point, pushing the movement of patrons in one way. Although it is accepted the area is less visible to home fans from the road due to the hedgerow and coaches, it could also be argued that this makes it harder for police to monitor and to assist if disorder erupts. The issue of public safety still needs to be considered. Although the location is to the side rather than in the centre of the car park, there will still be moving coaches parking immediately outside the front, and the majority of them arrive a lot later than expected. Another photo taken from the drone footage on the game against Leicester on the 28th. This shows the coaches actually parking on the intended area and blocking the area. I still feel there's a lack of clarification as to where these coaches will be in place and how they're going to be managed when the bar is there. Assuming the coaches will be parked in the same direction as on the drone photo, this means there'll be no space immediately out the front for access to emergency vehicles to get out the front of the site if required. Also, if the area is needed to be evacuated quickly by patrons, it is obstructed.
Sorry, Chair. You're referring to a drone photo. Do we have it?
Yes. This was the one that I submitted.
Is this the main photograph that we've looked at today with the annotations?
The one I submitted to you with the... Sorry. Yes, I think you probably can't see it very well because it's been printed, so apologies for that. Okay, I have got another version, David, if you would like to have a look. Just check that's the one.
Unfortunately, the quality of the photographs when they've been printed out has provided a lot of detail. So if you've got a better copy that can be shared with the committee, that would be good. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So this photograph is showing a number of coaches towards the area that is highlighted to be the bar area, with three or four coaches in that bar area. We've heard how the management of those coaches will change accordingly. So do you still have the same concerns about that? I'll just pass this to my colleagues.
Yes, we do, yeah. Can I continue? Is that okay?
Please do,
yeah?
Yes.
So from our perspective, there are still outstanding issues that need to be addressed. The bar still does not provide any seating area. Fans will be packed together in a fenced off area and standing to consume alcohol with no food offering. As raised before, usually when fans come off the coaches, they'll either head straight to the ground or walk to pubs known to be welcome to away supporters, which there are plenty of, and licensees hoping they'll be visited. These supporters usually disperse into smaller groups, no bigger than 10, and visit premises which do have seating areas available. By encouraging this area, this will encourage all the fans to come off the coaches to congregate in a larger group and give the potential for disorder to occur. The issue of larger groups congregating was accepted by the committee as a concern and as a risk for crime and disorder during the football at the last hearing, and this has still not been addressed. I had suggested to the applicant's consultant that they could consider installing a more permanent seating area using fixed furniture such as bench seating. This would have reduced the numbers and speed of alcohol drinking as well as intoxication. This was felt not an option due to the temporary setup of the bar. As before, it is feared that this facility provides alcohol to fans as soon as they come off the coaches. The fans will consume alcohol sooner and for longer due to being close to the stadium. And the lack of seating area will also encourage faster alcohol consumption, which will impact the wider football operation. I suspect there is a reason the applicant doesn't want to offer alcohol after the game because he knows the risks of alcohol with football fans. Drone footage that we had taken on the 28th, which unfortunately I couldn't show you today, does show that there are a number of Norwich football fans jumping in their cars and driving off from this car park immediately after the game. It was questioned before at the last hearing as to whether Norwich fans actually use this car park, and we now have the evidence to prove that this is the fact, that there will be both sets in this area. Although there's been an offering of SIA security to manage the fenced area and an offering of a traffic manager to control the parking of coaches, there has still been no considerations to the impact on the car park site as a whole, with the Norwich fans in the ability to remain in the car park to collect their vehicles and the potential risk of clashing and conflict between them. It is also useful to remember that some fans don't always wear colours, so there is the potential for Norwich fans to come into the bar and cause problems. As mentioned before, it is located in a busy car park, which is usually full at capacity on match days. Albeit that the bar will be at the side, there are still concerns about encouraging fans to remain in this area. In addition to the potential conflict of home and away fans within the car park, Lower Clarence Road is a well-known route for Norwich City fans to utilise to get to the football stadium. As these away fans will congregate in a large group, consideration will need to be given by police on how we will manage this when they all disperse at the same time to the ground. When the bar closes, we have to consider whether they need to be escorted. There remain concerns about the potential for confrontation with away and home fans mixed with the consumption of alcohol. Managing the football operation is complicated and varied. The event management plan supplied provides details but does not give any specifics on managing football fans or any risk assessment. Football is associated with disorder and violence, which is why we were reluctant to accept these. I mentioned last time that the fans have previously let off flares in licensed premises. Again, there's been no mention of this within the event management plan. And I'm also concerned how the funneling of patrons through one entrance and exit will take place if the flare is let off. As we heard earlier, there is a possibility that away fans may choose not to remain in the area due to the lack of seating, and especially in bad weather, and may treat it as a pit stop to purchase an alcoholic drink en route to either another licensed premise or to the ground in possession with drinks. Despite the management saying they'll put signage up, it is felt that many will depart with open vessels of alcohol around the city centre or en route to the ground, especially if they're leaving en masse due to bad weather. 3 SIA will struggle to take off drinks off all the fans if they all leave at once. The fans leaving in possession of open vessels of alcohol would contravene the conditions of the city's public space protection order. It is felt there is an expectation that police will be there to ensure the site and surrounding area will be managed to prevent disorder. Police sometimes attend the area for fan engagement and to monitor the fans. But a police presence to manage this cannot be expected. We are surprised the applicant has chosen the Liverpool game as a temporary event notice to trial. As mentioned, the Norwich versus Watford game is expected to have less coaches and most of the fans coming by train. It could be argued that this is an opportunity for them to trial this with less numbers expected. However, with the power of social media, there is a risk that those coming by train will be informed of a fan zone and will intentionally come to look for this. This operation does not appear to be a viable business plan, taking into account the cost of security, staffing, cost of toilet facilities and stock, which concerns us that many pints will need to be sold in order to make a profit. We feel that the main issue relating to the location remains. Despite technically moving it to a different area of the car park, the underlying problem of the location being unsuitable within an operational car park remain. In an email to Mr. Tempest on the 3rd, I stated that I appreciate that there is frustration, that there have been several inputs from different senior officers, and I think it is useful to recognise that this is not just one particular officer who is unhappy with this idea. All have deep-rooted concerns with this concept and specifically the location. In our opinion, the unsuitable location with vertical drinking in an operational coach park during a high-profile event is still an issue and would undermine the crime and disorder licensing objective. My colleague, the football liaison officer, PC Hamilton Rout, has made various inquiries nationally to establish if there is anything similar anywhere else around the country. Following our inquiries, the only closest scenario we have found is for a home fan zone in the grounds of the football stadium. This is within the grounds, ticketed and with benches. We are not aware of anything similar to this setup anywhere else and would question whether other forces would permit this. I am conscious that police are here objecting again and appearing difficult, and that is not our intention. If the licensing committee feel that this should be granted as an opportunity for the applicant to test the water and to prove their ability, then we will accept and respect the committee's decision and react accordingly. Additional resources will be arranged to manage the risk and closely monitor the operation. To summarise, Norfolk Police still have concerns with accepting these TENs in their current format and still feel these undermine the licensing objectives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Michelle. You have a colleague with you, Sergeant Payne, is that correct? Would you like to address the committee as well with any of your concerns and also describe your role?
Thank you, Chair. I am the sergeant overseeing the licensing unit at the moment. I wouldn't add a great amount to what Michelle has so thoroughly explained. I think there's a big difference between each of these 10 applications, as well as has been identified between the Watford and the Liverpool game. I think there's maybe an underappreciation of the dynamics of both these two clubs and the difficulties that their fans may bring us in terms of their passion and enthusiasm for supporting their teams. So whereby we object both the 10's application, I think the Liverpool game, there is a stronger objection from us based on the lack of understanding of the difficulties that might bring. But further than that, there's nothing much to say from me.
Okay, thank you. A question directed to either of you. Had we seen just the 110 today for the Watford game, would you have taken a substantially different view?
I think it would have been more acceptable in the senior management's eyes because of obviously the risk and the lower number of coaches expected. You know, again, I'm here because I've been asked to come and raise these concerns. I'm not going to say that we're happy with it, but I think it would have reflected better to have 110 initially.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that if the committee is minded to grant the 10s, resources will be made available. How will that excuse me, how will that play out? And what extra numbers would you dedicate to the event? Just for example, on Saturday.
I wouldn't like to say specifically. There have been conversations in place with the football officer who's currently sort of obtaining intelligence generally about the games, but also weighing up the risk about if these are granted. When there were initially conversations, there were talks about sort of 2 serials of an officer and sort of supervisors on each. And also, so that was mentioned, but I really can't tell you sort of how many officers they would look at to putting on. I think it would be wrong for me to mislead you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Presumably, where we have away fan and other premises where there are large numbers of fans congregate, there is a police presence close or you know, within easy reach of those premises already.
I don't know if Sergeant Payne wants to add anything, but my understanding, and again, I'm not a football officer, I only sort of get involved when it comes to licensed premises, but my understanding is that they will have spotters, like football spotters, that will monitor how many numbers are there, and also identify individuals who are potential risks, where we share that information with other forces. If we then feel the numbers are a potential concern, they will then report that to the commander, who will then arrange for officers to remain outside. That's about as much as I can give you, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Sergeant Payne, would you like to?
Yeah, if I can add to that, Chair. I've got some experience of policing football alongside my role here as well, and very much we utilise spotters, as Mr. Tempest has identified from his role in the police previously. Our policing of football is very much done via communication and compliance and understanding where our resources should lie. So we don't specifically target individual venues because of known problems. I think that brings us on to the information I pick up on a point that was made earlier around a physical barrier being created by a bus around the fencing, which is a great problem for us around our spotting of that vent as well, of not understanding where our, as we describe them in football terms, a risk element of fans that are coming into our area. If we haven't got a direct opportunity to surveil that risk area, then that becomes a great difficulty for us. But it's very much done through, as I say, communication and compliance rather than specific enforcement scattered around the city.
Okay, so where the location of the buses and the natural screening could be an advantage in some ways, you're saying that it is also problematic from a surveillance point of view.
But very much so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We've also heard from the applicant that the congregation of larger numbers is an advantage, while you've said that it's usually they disperse into smaller groups from the coaches, and that is easier to manage. So can you address specifically the suggestion that having them all in one place would be an advantage for you?
I don't think it would be an advantage. Again, I'm not a football sort of specialist. However, you know, they do disperse into smaller groups, making it easier for us to manage. And although they do go to other venues, the waterfront was mentioned, they all will go in different times. Some will head there earlier than others, and they will be sort of monitored. But this one will create a larger group. They will all then want to disperse when the bath closes, so they will all want to go together. And that will then mean that we will have to manage a larger group as they then head the way to the ground.
Okay, thank you. Sergeant Payne, would you like to add to that in any way?
Yeah, sorry, Michelle. Yeah, absolutely. It stands to reason, doesn't it, that I think the away section of Carrow Road holds over 2,000 away supporters. That's policing 2,000 people is obviously going to be a complicated process for us. So being able to separate them to some degree, and I accept the counter to my point that I previously made, but we don't want to have surveillance on 2,000 people. That's not the purpose of our policing model. It is to allow them to disperse throughout the city centre economy as anybody else would do and be policed appropriately.
Okay, thank you. And finally, before we hear from Mr. Tempest again, you mentioned trains arriving with fans on, and it's just a short walk from the train station to this venue. Do you think it's likely that fans that know about this will arrive directly from the train station when they get off the trains there?
I have no idea whether the applicant has made any contact with sort of fans organisations, or whether there's, but obviously, like I said, with social media, it doesn't take much to say, oh, look, this is what's happening here, come and follow. So, but yes, most of them will be by trains. But we have had venues that will put leaflets out or have people say, come to this venue, with promotions on and things. So there could be that they will then look to find the area.
Okay, thank you. Actually, any questions from councillors for Michelle? Sergeant Payne? Okay, Mr. Tempest, if you'd like to address some of those issues, please.
I don't know if there's any questions that we've got to address from the applicant. Want to do questions first?
I will need to address quite a lot of things that Michelle and Matt have just said for factual accuracy, but whether it's a question or me just giving it our view, because I think that's would be fair.
Yes, I think we can hear your response to the issues that have been raised. Obviously, try not to repeat yourself too much from what you said earlier, but specific points, please.
Thank you. I'll definitely try and do that. Thank you. So in order, I think the police are being a bit disingenuous. I mean, Michelle started by quoting from the temporary event notice, which says we will discuss with the police to ameliorate any areas of concern to the police. And the reality is, it should have said we attempt to, because prior to submitting that, several calls were made to the police to try and discuss it, and there was just no reply. And really, much of the things that have been mentioned today, as I said in my introduction, we're designing the event management plan because we haven't had the opportunity to do it with the police. So what's been presented is quite a thorough event management plan, which is, rather than in the spirit of communication and compliance, is being deconstructed a piece at a time. And really, we should be having those conversations before, and for some reason the police aren't prepared to do that. But anyway, several things were said. So, for example, Norwich City football fans might attend the area not wearing their team's regalia. And the first thing is, at the risk of repeating myself, this is not an advertised event. Michelle's claimed that it suddenly would be, or social media is being used. The only advertising has been in the EDP, and it will be contained, and there's sufficient regulation to contain that. But perhaps Ian or Dean might like to say how you will address people who have just snuck in because they want to drink, but they're Norwich City fans.
There is the option, if we have any suspicion that they aren't an away fan, if they are a home supporter, we can check their ticket for the game. So if they're going to be going to the game, they will have a ticket or an e-ticket on them, and that will say what area of the ground they're going into, whether they be a home supporter or an away supporter. If they are a home supporter, then they're simply asked to leave the premises.
Okay, thank you. Have you considered checking all your customers' tickets to ensure that this is the
We did originally think that, but we then thought it would take too long and then create the queue out into a car park. So that's why we were going to take it as and when they come in. If they're in their away colours, they would come in and then police it and monitor it as we go.
Thank you. Please carry on.
Thank you. both Michelle and Matt mentioned difficulty for spotters or difficult for the police to see. And that really is a case of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. This is a well-contained area which isn't visible from the street, and it will be difficult for anybody who's on foot in the car park to see, because the coaches will be stacked in front of it. But it clearly won't be difficult for emergency vehicles, because there's somebody in the car park who's an SAA officer who's marshalling those coaches and can marshal emergency vehicles, and there will be no car traffic in the area around the coaches. And actually, at the last hearing, I was led to believe that the police produced a drone photograph of the car park without a bar in it. But now I think we're being led to believe that suddenly they're going to have to do extra work to surveil the car park, which kind of is a bit of a contradiction. Spotters will risk assess, and on the basis of that risk assess, they'll go to the place, but they won't, you will not, as a commander, you will not deploy 2 serials to a car park where you can just look at CCTV, or you can have a spotter go down there, particularly if you know in advance that the risks of these things happening is very low. Because if you do that, what you're doing is those serials are not able to react to spontaneous disorder for the 1900 away supporters who are actually in Norwich city centre with nowhere else to drink, who might cause into conflict. So I think we ought to maybe raise a question about that concept. The photo that was produced, actually, which was referred to, David, actually has coaches in the bar area. And as we've tried to suggest with our hard to see annotated photograph, that bar area, it will be completely clear, and the coaches will stack away from that rather than in it. So that does create quite a false image, I think. We unfortunately, we can't take a picture of it on a match day with the bar because it hasn't run yet, but that first coach will be arriving long before the bars open, and will be parked with sufficient room away from those ped fence barriers which constitute the outside of the drinking area, and then they'll stack away from that. That is the amount of traffic that will be there, and I don't see, well, personally, how is that a barrier to the police seeing what's going on? Because you just literally go to the side of the coach, and there is what's going on, and let alone CCTV images and spotters, which spotters don't just stand back from a distance, they go in amongst the activity to find out what's going on. So that seemed to be, raising concerns over something that logistically can't and won't happen. There was talk about letting off flares, so I can tell you that the risk of individuals carrying or using flares will be risk assessed with intelligence by the football intelligence community. And if there's a specific risk, then the officers who are assessing that will have to say, are the person carrying flares likely to go into the ground to let them off? And the chances are they won't. So where are they going to do it? So are these people just happening to be on a coach that for the first time rolls up at a bar that can host 100, 120 people with a flare and say, I know, we'll let a flare off here, when there's surveillance and CCTV and physical monitoring by door supervisors? And I would suggest that in the communication role with the police is, as happens before a game, the football liaison officer and the spotters do that communication. And if there's a risk of that nature, it could occur anywhere. There's absolutely no reason to suspect that this is suddenly going to happen at a pop-up bar that happens in this car park. It's just a minimal risk that should be managed by communication with the football liaison officers, and the deployment of the extra resources. I mean, what Michelle didn't say is that as part of we'd like to negotiate with you and get the operating schedule right so that the licensing objectives are met. At one stage, Superintendent Clark put forward a costed policing plan for more than 2 serials, which is actually more than from memory, the deployment for the whole of the away team. And their consistency in their arguments about what's proportionate and what meets the licensing objectives, it just seems to vary according to which police officer you speak to. And what Michelle also didn't say is that I won't show the emails, and I couldn't do now anyway, but there's been a sequence of emails, the source of which has been a different police officer, and in several of them they said, okay, then we accept that. And then the next one, another police officer comes in and thinks of a different reason, many of which isn't related to the licensing objectives. They're just things that the police have thought of because they don't want this to happen. And Michelle said to me, well, it's ironic because when you were a football commander, you would have objected to this. Well, I wouldn't have liked the idea of it because it involves the police having to think about things. But what I would have done is said, make sure that place operates so there's strict security and you know you're going to keep the licensing objectives. And if you do that, let's go and put our resources elsewhere. So that is all we're offering to do with that. There was talk about the Liverpool game, and I guess we would say that we're back here now because the Watford game is believed to be, we have a strong event management plan, which we will stick to. It's not just made up so people can hear it. That the success of this operation and the viability of this as a future business depends on compliance with those objectives. The police could delegate this and then just watch what happens and liaise as they do with any other place. That will be a proportionate response, we would argue, and the Watford game allows that to happen. As it happens, we perhaps naively considered that we could have an event management plan, negotiate with the police, and then we would change and amend the event management plan according to what happened at the event. In other words, what should be happening, or in advance of this, the event happens on Saturday, there's a debrief, which happens anywhere, and we can include a licensing debrief, and then there's some conversation about what would be proportionate for a higher risk game with more people. But we haven't had any of that. We just had a blanket, no, we don't like the idea of the event. So the Watford game is the one that I think, I'm speaking for Dean, I'll look around in a minute to see who's not looking unhappy about this, but we want to try. And yes, that is a loss leader, because it's only a loss leader in terms of the money that's spent to make the security right. After that, if it becomes a viable business with the proportionate level of security, more spend will happen and there are opportunities to try this model elsewhere. That is a business model. It's not for the police really to comment about what is financially viable, but the reality is you would try something and make sure it works and then proportionally stagger that up by putting more investment in it. And that's all that we're trying to do. I think that's simply, have I said anything that I shouldn't have said? There was one last point, wasn't there? So, yeah, I probably have said enough and I'm repeating myself, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, Sergeant Payne, would you like to respond to the suggestion that you've creating situations to object to this because you simply don't want it to happen?
I think that's unfair to say that, and also, and as I've sort of mentioned in my representation, there have been sort of different perspectives from different commanders. Obviously, they're the ones in charge of different football games, and I have to get the okay from those. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, when I quoted my email, it isn't one specific commander. There are others that have actually said, we've had sort of tactical advisors and other inspectors and sort of higher that have said, we think this is a concern because you're encouraging the groups to be larger and they will then all have to migrate to the ground en masse. So that does create us more of an issue of potential for crime and disorder. So I think it's unfair to sort of say we're just trying to be difficult, and that's not something. And I'd like to think Mr. Tempest knows me better than that. That it wouldn't be something that we are, determined to sort of just completely be difficult. As you can appreciate, there are different perspectives from different police chiefs, but they will predominantly saying the same thing. They have concerns when it comes to football and crime and disorder.
Yeah, thank you. I asked that question, Mr. Tempest, because we don't see that many TENs come to the committee, and often we hear from Michelle or other representatives, and they're very open to how the management plan will adapt, and quite often the TENs are given the go-ahead following discussions through the committee. I mean, the trick with TENs really is to make sure they don't come to the committee in the first place. And this is the second time we've heard this, and the concerns from the police appear to be largely the same. Accepting that you've moved the bar area does address some of those issues to a point. It's for the committee to decide how far that ameliorates our concerns. But also there does remain a situation where large numbers of away fans are going to be leaving this venue potentially at the same time, and making their way down to the ground alongside home fans who leave local pubs like the Coach and Horses, Jubilee, and potentially the Canary Club and others in the area. So it is a walkway for large numbers of home fans, and with this, a large group of away fans at the same time.
So I'll cover the potential volume of home and away fans at the time of dispersal. But if I can give you an example then about the conversations that I've had with the police, the first person to be consulted with the football liaison officer, who categorically said that there should be no seating.
Sorry, if I can add to that, I wasn't actually able to attend the meeting, so it was the football officer on her own. I know this was raised at the last hearing, and I have spoken to her about this. And she said that she was actually questioning whether there was going to be any seating, because obviously when we had the fan zone for the Euros, due to COVID restrictions, they had to be seated. She said at no point did she ever say, look, we don't want seating. Obviously, we get concerns with sort of foldable tables and the chairs could potentially be a weapon. And this is something that we need to address. And if they were going to look to have any furniture, it would need to be sort of fixed, something that couldn't be used. But she's denying that at no point did she actually say. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, so I can't sort of verify that. But I do think that she was just literally there to find out, because she was also questioning, because originally the original plan was that they wanted to have just like little tape just round to mark the area, and she's like, well, you need a boundary at least. So this is where she was there as an advisory role, and to get the information to then forward that to the actual sort of bosses. But my understanding, she never at any point said, well, no, we don't want you to have any. If anything, the Euros was a good example, although that was mentioned as something that worked really well before. If we can just confirm, obviously that was just England fans, that wasn't mixing or any potential mix of any sort of different groups. And obviously it was all seated as well. And there was, I think, double the security of what we're looking at, if not more. So I think that's sort of slightly different. And if I can just go back to the point where I think that sort of got a little bit sort of twisted slightly, when I was mentioning about home fans potentially using it, yes, there is a risk they could turn up at the at the car park and start sort of just there to go to the away fans. But my point really was the fact that people that are parking there could then go, oh, there's a bar over here, let's go have a look. So they could then sort of use that as well. But I didn't want it to look, just wanted to sort of clarify that for you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So for clarity, then you're saying that the police point of view is that tables and chairs would be an advantage here, and also at the fan zone for the Euros. I understand, was it table service as well? Okay.
Yes, that's right. My last conversation with Mr. Tempest, I did say, can they not consider at least having some wooden benches or something to at least make people seated, restrict the numbers, and have it sort of so it would reduce the amount of intoxication as well. You drink less when you sit down.
Yes, and the completion of that dialogue was, yes, of course we can consider that, but that will be more fixed or heavyweight furniture, and we won't be able to do that for the Watford game. And in any event, the occupancy, say at its maximum 120 people in that area, is very sparse. And so I did cover the risk of vertical drinking and monitoring people that they weren't drinking excessively, etc. But it's just, in a way, that just exemplifies. Normally we would have these discussions about detail before, but we seem to be having them in front of members. So apologies. You did mention another question about the volume of people at dispersal, and yes, it is a busy road, because it is, for that part of Norwich city centre and the estates from there, going past that car park towards Carrow Road is a main route. But on Saturday, the worst you can expect is that that busy period in the last 30 minutes before kick-off, which is the busiest, when most crowds are on that road, there'll be an extra 100 people who, instead of been drinking somewhere where they were in Norwich, will have been drinking in a regulated environment in the coach park. And that drinking will be regulated, unlike where they might have been elsewhere. So yes, there'll be a crowd walking there, but there's going to be a crowd walking there anyway, is the discussion. And at least the ones that have been drinking at this bar, you know how much they've had, where you've had it, what their behaviour's like before they set off. And there's some opportunity for the police, if they have deployed, to just be part of that anyway, which is normal practice if they perceive there to be a high volume of people. So it's not adding to it in any, you know, of the 2,000 people. You know, it really is a drop in the ocean, and that's a proportionate element. And all the other things that we've discussed, particularly about crime and disorder, but also public safety, really are quite robust in this event management plan for Saturday. So I think that is rather, like I said about the risk assessment for rock throwing. This is low risk, low likelihood.
Thank you. We're considering 2 tents here. One of them is on Tuesday, where you've accepted there'll be many more fans who will have travelled for a number of hours before reaching the venue. So we're considering both at the same time, and there are issues related that the police have raised that I don't think have been addressed yet, and dismissing them as something that won't happen doesn't necessarily mean that it won't happen. There are a number of potential flashpoints here, and we highlighted this at the last committee meeting, that while the likelihood might be low of flashpoints occurring, there is a high potential for something quite serious to happen if one of those unlikely events was to begin. I think that's what the police have told us previously, and in this committee meeting as well. There still remains the possibility of maybe 100, 150 people leaving this venue, having been drinking for a couple of hours, and all going to the ground at the same time alongside Norwich City fans. And the police have to consider that possibility within that for flashpoints to occur. Michelle, can you confirm that that's still the case?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Thanks.
Is there anything else that Mr. Tempest has talked about that you'd like to address and come back on?
No, I don't think there's anything else. Chair.
Okay. Any questions or suggestions for the applicant?
I know there has been mention of a risk assessment, but we haven't actually seen anything. And I think this, like the police do, that would change for different, different games. So I think that is something as well that hasn't been considered enough.
Yeah. So, Mr. Tempest, has there been any risk assessment carried out to date?
Yes, that document, I've got 5 of the pages I've got here, risk assessment considerations. An iteration of that was shared with the police. It's not a risk assessment as such, because the risk assessment will be event-based on the basis of what the intelligence that happens on the day. But the principles, all the risks have been considered. And again, the frustration, I think, is normally the police would be part of that process, and would there be a two-way exchange of information about risk, including likelihood and threat, and for some reason that is not happening here, apart from in this hearing. It's not because the applicant has, or the person giving notice hasn't tried, or that assessment hasn't taken place. But I would, at the risk of coming back, I know you weren't summarising there, were you, Chair? But that Watford game is controlled, and if I was still in the police, I would say, sorry for the vernacular, but fill your boots. Let's have that CCTV control. Let's beam those pictures up there. We know where at least 100 people are going to be that would otherwise wouldn't be regulated at all. But for some reason, that's just too much to consider, it appears.
Okay, there is we've heard that there is a likelihood that the publicity for this event will go beyond your localized signage, and people who are arriving on the trains could decide to attend. So there is a clear chance that there might be up to 300 people on Saturday as well as Tuesday from those coming from the trains, and presumably there will be more than 300 people at the match anyway from Watford. So can you address that? And again, it's we're talking about potentially large numbers of people, and the committee has to address the potential, not just what you think might happen.
So in my what I might call the scripted introduction, I did actually mention the what would happen, what is likely to happen when coaches arrive and in that vicinity. I did cover that. And one thing I didn't mention specifically is home supporters' behaviour. So home supporters, yes, there are some that will arrive in that coach park by car, but they will not be parking in close proximity to the bar or drinking area. They might go and have a look, but they'll soon see it's well regulated and there's not an offer for them. And actually, what if they arrive early? What are they wanting to do? They're wanting to go and find somewhere to have a drink, of which they know where to go. So that the likelihood is basically that some people decide, a high risk individual group decide that they're going to change their behaviour wholesale because something might have happened, and not become football supporters who actually have their drinking behaviour when they have their drinking behaviour, or refuse service and then just go and find somewhere else to have a drink, but they will for some reason concentrate and target this particular bar. And with all the security measures in place and the natural surveillance and the protection, that is just not a viable thing for them to do. The only way they would do it is if there was some, I don't know, there was some sort of counterintelligence that the football liaison officer picked up saying, right, all the high-risk supporters who aren't going to the game will suddenly come and rock up at this bar. That and Matt will tell me if I'm wrong, but that just doesn't happen. They're highly monitored. Those individuals are highly monitored. They are not going to do this. But as you say, none of us can say 100%. We can just say, are the licensing objectives covered by the operating schedule? And we believe they strongly are.
Okay, thank you. I note that my colleagues have been making notes. Any questions from Councillor? Actually, Councillor Ackroyd first, because we haven't had you for a while.
So, not necessarily following on from what you've just been saying, but something that Michelle mentioned, which is the one entrance, one exit setup that you've obviously got. And I understand that that's because you've got a clicker system, and that's how the clicker system works. But I do have a concern that, you've got people maybe potentially pushing out, pushing in, how you think you'll manage that, and if there is any clicker system available that would speak to another clicker, and you could have two separate entrance exits.
It is viable to work with an entrance and exit system with separate clickers. But again, this is part of our ongoing risk assessment as to, is it required? Do we need it? Is there certain games we will need it, certain games we won't need it due to the numbers that are going to be attending? And that's something we can work on going forwards.
So, sorry, you're saying that if you felt, therefore, in future, based on, say you actually went ahead Saturday, if you felt it wasn't viable with the one, I'm just thinking if there was an emergency or anything like that, one entrance is very limiting, but you're saying this is something that you would consider for the future, to have separate entrance exit.
Yeah, by all means, we could, if we consider doing that in the future, if we feel it's viable, but also in the event of emergency, they are only crowd barriers. They can be opened very, very easily and very, very quickly to make a larger gap for an exit or to create another exit if we needed to. It can be opened very quickly and moved very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-ups? Okay, Councillor Schmierer, please.
Yeah, actually, I'll follow up on that in terms of the operation of that sort of opening up those barriers that you've got in place in the case of an emergency there. What level of experience or training, knowledge do your staff and yourself have of it, please?
There is no specific training you can have to moving a barrier. It's simply hooked in and unhooked to move it. But dealing with emergency situations and events is all part of their training and SIA regulations. And they will know if there's a requirement to move that barrier, they will move that barrier. And again, I'll be working with Dean on site all the time. There'll be a constant communication. They'll be in radio contact with each other at all times. If they feel there's a need to open more barriers, they'll open more barriers. If they feel there's a need to make another entrance or exit, they'll make another entrance or exit. That's all part of the risk assessment on the day and in the case of any event.
Second question, if I could, and I'd actually just like to sort of reiterate what the chair has said, that how surprised I actually was that this tender has actually come to committee, because we've seen a sort of plethora of them coming through around the city centre, similar sort of applications that the police have not objected to in car parks around the city centre. And I just also want to reiterate what Councillor Stuteley said, which is, while I understand that the likelihood of negative impacts may be low, the consequences can, of course, be severe, and in particular when it comes to concerning the sale and consumption of large amounts of alcohol associated with football matches. I think we do have to potentially be overly cautious, because if the sort of oversight and management of the sort of wider match day experience goes wrong, it can go catastrophically wrong. And I think we saw an example of that in London, in Wembley, earlier this year. And as I said, my question relates to that sale and consumption of large amounts of alcohol, and I think it's something that Michelle referred to, and the sort of police certainly have. And I don't know whether Mr. Tempest, you might want to come back on certain of these specific questions, which I don't believe you answered. In particular, and I'm just going to quote a few of the things. Obviously, you mentioned about the vertical issue, but there's no, for example, food offering. There was the issue about potentially the sort of bad weather pit stop, if, for example, it's bad weather and people are consuming alcohol quickly and then leaving with open vessels. And of course, there is the issue about the business proposal, which maybe yourself might want to go into a little bit more detail, which means that in order to make this viable, lots of pints will have to be sold in the space of 1.5 hours. And so I want to just also remind you, as obviously we do have these licensing objectives, you've referred to them yourself, and just draw attention to page 9 of the agenda, which are objective 24, which is the prevention of public nuisance. And public nuisance is to be interpreted in its widest sense and will include issues such as noise, light, odour, litter and antisocial behaviour. That's from paragraph 24.2, and also paragraph 24.4, which is that the council will normally permit the hours during which alcohol is sold to match the normal trading hours during which other sales take place, unless there are exceptional reasons such as disturbance or disorder attributable to the location and or the premises and relative representations that have been made. So I think if you could maybe address those, as well as the nature and about the speed of the consumption of alcohol, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can, if you don't mind, I'll ask a new speaker to comment in a minute. But when I've said this is well regulated, this will be well regulated, that consideration has to be given to the amount of alcohol that's consumed and how quickly. So first of all, the vertical drinking was referred to the density and not being able to see people and what people are doing, and watching that people aren't having multiple rounds, etc., which is addressed. So then there's the issue about stopping people drinking a lot effectively. And interestingly, when we were waiting, Jodie has just asked to say what she said to me in the corridor was saying about this, about regulation of the amount of consumption, because if this becomes the pit stop, which seems to be branded where people are having a lot to drink, then it's in nobody's benefit, and that's not the business model. The business model is these people are drinking somewhere, and we can regulate it better than they are and provide something that it creates revenue and a good experience for those drinkers. But if you don't mind, you're probably going to have to introduce yourself and then say what you said to me.
Hiya, I'm Jodie, part of the team with Dean. In terms of the speed of drinking and the volume that they're going to drink, it will be assessed as the hour goes on. If we deemed that we thought they were on the verge of they've had too much, or security deemed it that they've had too much, we will make that decision there and then. If we think they've had 3 pints, and if they were to have another one, when they got to the ground, they'd be refused entry. So we would have that conversation with them that we can sell them the next one, but fully expect not to get in the ground. So on a basis of a business front as well, we wouldn't be selling them that 4th pint, 5th pint, whatever it is. I've been in football for 16 years, 17 years, up and down the country, and you have to make that decision. You take a fan to one side. Do you need it? Do you really need that extra pint? Save it, get in the ground, have the pint in the ground. If we think they've had too much or they're on the verge of it, we'll pass them a bottle of water. You need that, go and take half an hour. Take half an hour, go down to the ground. By the time you get to the ground, you're going to be at that level that you're going to get in. We're not going to sell them 8, 9, 13 pints in an hour and go, see you later, it's your job. They're there for a reason. They've come to watch football, and we're not going to ruin that for them. So that's on my. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Shamira had other questions relating to open vessels. Again, should there be a mass exodus from the event for whatever reason, whether it be because everyone decides to leave it as you close, or for whatever other reason, a weather event, for example, how are you going to prevent people from taking open vessels onto the street?
Chair, it's a non-licensed room. So there will be something that will close or should be taken off-site.
Can you clarify that for us, please? I was asking the question, how they're going to prevent people from taking them off-site.
Yes, Chair. It was just, I think you were saying how do open vessels be prevented from going off-site? I was just flagging there shouldn't be any alcohol going off-site.
Okay. Thank you for clarity. Any alcohol closed or open, and also for clarity, the protection order, which I'll just find. That Michelle referenced, public spaces protection order, preventing the consumption of alcohol in public places around the city centre. That is only in place where a police officer requests that people stop drinking. So have I got that right, David? Is it?
Yes, Chair, that's my understanding.
Yeah, okay, so so for clarity on this, Michelle, would it be your officers would request people to stop drinking should they take vessels outside?
Yes, that's right, Chair. If an officer believes that they're going to be disorderly and it could impact disorder and they're in groups or alone with drink, then yes, that would be something that officers would want to take off. That's something that we try and minimise in the city centre because of the issues that we have elsewhere. So this is something that we work with venues, particularly during the Euros and during other football games, to try and reduce people wandering around with alcohol.
Okay, thank you. So I think the issue that hasn't been fully addressed is how that will be prevented when potentially large numbers of people are leaving at the same time for whatever reason.
Obviously, the SIA staff will be on the entrance and exit, whether there be one, whether there be two of them. They will be at them points. And at times when larger crowds are gathering, more staff will be deployed to them areas to ask people to stop drinking leave their drink at the premises, finish their drink, put it in the bin, whatever it may be. But not every single person is going to want to leave with a drink. It isn't going to be as big an issue as it's thought to be, because there isn't going to be all them people that want to leave with their drink. A lot of people will finish their drink in a timely manner to go down to the ground and enjoy the rest of their day. But those that do want to bring a drink out with them, we will challenge them, advise them it's not appropriate. There'll be appropriate signage on place inside the exits where it's visible, saying, please do not take your drinks beyond this point.
Okay, thank you. I think, I mean, we are looking at worst case scenario here. There might be 300 people. It might begin to rain or snow, and everyone decides to leave at the same time, especially if it's relatively close to kick off. It's going to be impossible to ensure that at least some numbers of people don't leave with full drinks, especially if they've just bought them.
Can I just come back on the PSPO? Because actually what the order says, it designates an area where it's not legal for individuals to consume alcohol. The fact that police are the agents to enforce that is an issue, but actually there's a personal responsibility involved as well, and it's the same personal responsibility for match goers who actually want to get in the football ground. Yeah, there might be some individuals, small number, who try and secrete alcohol away, but they will not expect to be able to drink whatever bottles, open drinks, walking through the streets, leave that car park doing it, in addition to the fact that in the same way it's the onus is on them as individuals to comply with that order, and in the same way that all the Ian's operatives are going to stop them doing it anyway.
Okay, are visiting fans all aware of the public spaces protection order that's in place in the city?
I think that's a question for the police, because it's the same as anybody who's in the city centre within the PSPO designated area. So it's for the police to say how that's publicised.
I would suggest very much no. I think it's somewhat naive for us to expect Liverpool fans turning up on a Tuesday night to really be overly interested in the Norwich City Centre public protection area. I think from our perspective, obviously our role here is around reducing flashpoints, and I've already talked about how we look to police. I said that Mr. Tempest has got previous experience of that. There's lots of comments of it will be okay, there won't be more than this amount of people turn up. I think comments as well around we could sell somebody a fourth pint and then tell them they won't get into the ground. That's a flashpoint for us. There's potentially going to be an arrest made at the gate if that happens around other away fans that have also travelled to the game, and the disappointment that then brings. So I don't want to grab onto that one particular point, but we are very much of the mindset to reduce some flashpoints, not to look to say it's okay, we've got resources to deal with them when they occur.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tempest?
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, but from different perspectives. So what does regulation mean? Regulation for businesses that sell alcohol means they have to put measures in place to make sure that things happen or don't happen. And those have been described here, taking alcoholic drinks out of the ground, etc. And that is a proportionate thing to be expected to do, and the right level of resource will be put in place to make that happen, and there'll be surveillance during and post event to make sure that happened. So the scale of the problem is I think what we're debating, and this is because this is a secure and regulated environment, and we've tested it really quite ruthlessly with this debate. You could argue that there's more protection for people doing the things that Matt's just described, by virtue of the fact that the staff Jodie's described doing those interventions to make sure that, and that's a low-key intervention, that's not a high conflict, give me that drink or you're going to be arrested. That is, you want to get in a few minutes, well, I think you've had enough, and if you have any more, you won't actually achieve what you want to achieve today. And that's regulation, that's how the licensed trade operates. So I think we're saying the same things, just from two different perspectives.
Okay, any further questions from members? Councillor Ackroyd.
I know we've talked about this before, but for clarity, for me, never mind if people have got drinks or not, you're going to stop them taking a drink out. But if there is a large crowd left when the bar closes, how will you, what is your risk assessment for managing that crowd of people as they go down your path? I mean, do you just sort of send a few people at a time? How will you make sure that that's a safe leaving of the area as they go out onto the public highway, as it were? Thank you.
Yeah, I suspect, I'll leave it to you to full answer, but I suspect that because you're fixing the hours and there's a latest hour at which people will be able to buy drinks, there'll be some process to smooth that over. So some people think, actually, we're going to go early before others, and that naturally regulates the crowd. But I'm not doing that, so you maybe have to describe that yourself.
So yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, they will disperse as they go. The fencing will be wide enough to allow people to all walk down there even more safely than if they were coming off the coach. 2 or 3 coaches turn up, and you're talking about 140 people coming off a coach, 2 coaches. It's going to be a lot safer for them to walk down there. It will be just dispersing off the coaches, dispersing around the car park, then trying to find their way out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of times that it is about interpretation and the balance between the measures that you put in place, and that it's for the committee to decide whether they will meet the licensing objectives. We have a situation where potentially even on Saturday there could be 300 people in the bar. Each could be drinking 4 or 5 pints. And then leaving at the same time. So that's sort of the worst case scenario, or the sort of maximum level that you might be expecting. And that's really what we have to consider, balanced with the measures that you've put in place and you've stated the likelihood of any of those issues that the police have raised from happening. So we'll consider all that in our determination. Michelle or Sergeant Payne, would you like to add anything before? Okay, thank you. I've got another question from Councillor Schmira, please.
Yeah, I've just got one final question, which relates to the actual car park. At the moment, the 3 points, as I understand it, that I don't think have quite been addressed yet, or maybe I missed it, so in which case apologies. One is the lack of markings for the coaches as they are at the moment, in terms of where they can park. Now, I understand, of course, that you have got the sort of car parking marshal in place there, but that's something that was certainly flagged up, and linked to that is obviously the sort of public safety issues with sort of coaches coming potentially late, having get held up in traffic at the same time as your sort of the half an hour before the when your pub area, bar area is closing down. So issues there with regards to potential public safety in terms of road traffic accidents. And then finally, of course, with the actual car park for the actual sort of domestic car park per se, with regards to domestic vehicles, people arriving, Norwich City fans, potentially at a similar sort of time as the potential of a flashpoint there. So if you could maybe assuage those concerns that have been flagged up, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll start by describing how we should have put an operating plan with the parking arrangements in it. That would have probably helped. So regrettably, I haven't done that. But just to reiterate, the first coach to come in, which will be before the bar opens, will be parked next to the outside of the ped fencing of the drinking area. And then coaches after that will be stacked further away as they get towards the entrance. And then on for the Liverpool game, that clearly will extend to a second row and a third row, but not for Saturday's game. Other cars that are parked from wherever home or away supporters will not be in that coach parking area at all. So they're the others, the south side, I think it is, of the entrance So there'll be a coach park area designated at the top with somebody marshalling it, and cars parked the other side, and then going down into the lower car park via that piece of road that I've described on the photograph. So the traffic segregation is actually, I think, really slick. I mean, it's certainly been thought about since last time, and the fact that person who's doing that role, it won't just be a traffic management officer, there'll be an SIA registered operative as well. And that is a viable operational plan to make sure that there's that protection, and it also creates a natural, filter for people who are getting off last, have to make a decision about whether it's worth going in, and it creates a filter for custom members as well, I suggest. Sorry, is there anything I've missed out in mind?
Sorry, Chair, can I?
Michelle, please.
So on the photo that you've submitted that has got the coaches parked where you've put that the site will be, there's actually vehicles parked on that side. Are you saying that there won't be any there?
Yeah, that's 100% right.
That's been agreed by the.
Full control of the car park, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Where will you park your own vehicles?
Behind the bar, because the bar is a actual bus. It actually comes in, it's drivable, so that will actually be, the only other vehicle will have will be the van with a stop, which will actually go behind the bus for our use for getting stuff out.
Okay, so they'll be on site. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anything else to cover? Just going back to a question that Councillor Schmier asked about the arrival of the coaches, and you've mentioned that they will be managed from the bar outwards, and you've said a safe distance from the bar. You've not specified what that distance is, and also it would. I don't know whether we would need to have a route through for emergency service vehicles, and if so, can you specify how you would arrange that, please?
Yeah, I think from the picture you can see the coaches where they park, the ones in the middle, they obviously wouldn't be there. Once we start, they would either be in front of the bar all the way down. Then we've got the other side where the cars, which are parked now. So that would actually be the second side of the coaches coming down. So you'd have the entire middle, which I think there's a lane down the middle, and which you'd even get two coaches down. So that's 4 coaches worth down either between the two. It's like a street lamp in the middle of it there. So there's more than enough access to get any kind of emergency services down there.
Okay, thank you for that. And the distance the first coach will be from your barrier, please.
2 to 3 coaches worth, so just to give them enough to actually width-wise. Sorry, so you're looking 9 meters.
Okay, thank you. Committee will note that, and I think David has written that down. Okay, David, is there anything that you'd like to add, summing up?
No, Chair, even if anybody's elected me, I don't have anything to say. Okay,
I meant from a legal point of view, of course. Okay.
No, Chair, unless you want me to review probably best if I do say the times again.
Yes.
So as amended, 18th September, what's being sought is 1300 to 1430. 21st of September, what's being sought is 1745 to 1915.
And for clarification also, we are considering both 10s at the same time, and there is no option for the committee to consider one or the other.
You are making separate decisions at the same committee meeting.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yes, okay, so just for further clarity, we could potentially issue 110 and not the other.
Yes, Chair, you can counter notice to 110 and not to the other if that was your view.
Thank you. Okay, and one last opportunity for everybody else to speak if they wish to. Mr. Tempest, I'm sure you will.
Thanks. I'd just say thank you for your patience, and I'd ask you to consider proportionality of your decision, or proportionality in your decision, on the basis that, as Councillor Schmier rightly says, that where for example, antisocial behaviour or other licensing controls may impact on residential area, etc., then you might consider taking action and opposing this. But it also says if the person can demonstrate or applicant can demonstrate they've got effective measures. And actually, the discussions we've been having, there are with us that surveillance, the level of security, the marshalling of the car park, with a plethora of things that are now, which will be put in place, that does mitigate against those issues that have been raised. And what remains is speculation that somebody's going to have a flare, but even that, or pick up a rock, even that, there is built into that operating schedule. There are mitigating things, for example, natural surveillance, CCTV, the screening and barrier and the entry and exit, monitoring. All of that has actually been covered, but it seems a long time ago and in quite a lot of depth because of the discussion. So thank you for bearing with us.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, you've gone into a lot of detail about those mitigation measures, and it's for the committee to decide whether that mitigation will be sufficient to address the concerns of the police. One of the items on page 9, 24.2, that we haven't considered is noise. And while the public don't feed into the TENS notifications, we do know that there is a concern about noise, and there will be a noise issue related to these events. Would you accept that?
Sorry, no. I think we would look to, if you had a representation from environmental protection that there would be a noise issue, that would be relevant. But actually, as has been described, there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of people, some singing, some chanting, many walking in this area. And the fact that 100 of them are in a car park behind a fence probably doesn't go to add to that. But I would ask if there is a representation from environmental protection that we probably need to hear.
Okay, well, we've not heard one from environmental protection.
Yes,
so.
Chair, I don't think noise will be a consideration, as your statutory obligation is to have regard to the objection notice. And I don't think noise is mentioned by the police.
It's not, so therefore the committee notes that, and I'll withdraw that comment. Thank you to everybody. I think we'll have a comfort break before we begin our determination discussion, and I suggest that we come back at 2 o'clock, no earlier than 2 o'clock, please. Thank you to all for now. Sorry, yeah, Leonie. Okay, welcome back to Norwich City Council Licensing Subcommittee. Thursday, 16th of September 2021. We're considering the temporary event notice for car park Lower Clarence Road in Norwich. We considered all the evidence provided and the presentation put forward, and the committee's decision is to issue 2 counter notices against these 10s, and I'll just go through the reasons. So the committee notes the change of hours and the withdrawal of the public protection objection. Traffic safety appears to be mitigated with risk minimised rather than eliminated, noting the new plan and the location of the new location of the bar. Flashpoint on site is considered to be minor due to regulation. Missiles, again, less availability for those than the previous application, and also regulated. Queuing outside the site, again, will be regulated and prevented. The committee accepts that flares could be let off anywhere. And finally, concerns about the single entrance are again mitigated. Moving on to the reasons for the counter notice, and they are due to the rapid consumption of alcohol. The concern that mitigation offered will not be sufficient to prevent alcohol from leaving the site, both throughout the event and at the close, or if people leave en masse for any reason. And the concern here being contribution to crime and disorder. Statutory guidance states police as the primary source of evidence on crime and disorder. So on one hand, the police evidence is that larger groups are not safer than dispersed into smaller groups, as happens now amongst away fans, while the applicant's claim is that properly regulated, the larger groups better promote the licensing objectives. On balance, the committee accepts the police evidence for potential flashpoints. So therefore, the committee will issue 2 counter notices as appropriate to the prevention of crime and disorder on the crime and disorder licensing objectives. Okay, so thank you for everyone for attending today. Are there any questions before we conclude? Okay, thank you again. That brings the meeting to a close. Thank you.